In a world of easy answers, there is a place for courageous, critical inquiry. This is Questions Have Power. You have been summoned to serve as the jury. Your role is to weigh the evidence presented and deliver your verdict in our deliberation room, the comment section. The proceeding is about to begin. This proceeding is now in session. Members of the jury and our esteemed panel in the Scholarly Sanctum, we now gavel in the Critical Inquiry Prosecution of the biblical text. As the proctor for this grand prosecution, my role is to present the case file and ensure our impartial proceeding is conducted with the utmost intellectual rigor. Tonight, we open the Dragons in the Bible investigation. We begin not with the origin story, but with the indictment itself, the Leviathan. Our proceeding will prosecute this indictment first. We will then trace the evidence back to the foundational archetypes, the Serpent origin arc, in subsequent proceedings. We open Case File 41.1, the Leviathan Indictment, prosecuting the divine speech from the whirlwind in Job, chapter 41. This text is God's own description of the creature, Leviathan, and is the provocative response to the human dynamic of Job's cry for justice. I will read the key verses that frame this proceeding into the record from the King James Version, Job chapter 41, verse 1, and verses 9 through 10. Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him? None is so fierce that dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me? To guide this proceeding, we again call upon our two esteemed senior investigators, Dr. Eleanor Vance and Dr. Alistair Finch. Members of the jury, our investigation into the Leviathan indictment will proceed across three critical exhibits, each framed as a central question. First, in Exhibit A, we prosecute, what is Leviathan, an ancient Near Eastern chaos monster or a biblical polemic? Next, in Exhibit B, we prosecute the fiery dragon, Job chapter 41, verses 18 through 21, poetic hyperbole or fiery serpent archetype. And lastly, in Exhibit C, we prosecute the text's core human dynamic, Leviathan's purpose, a divine evasion or God's true answer. Dr. Vance and Dr. Finch will present their conflicting findings on each. Let us begin. We now proceed to Exhibit A as we prosecute what is Leviathan, an ancient Near Eastern chaos monster or a biblical polemic. Dr. Vance, you will present the historical critical challenge. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Proctor. The human dynamic of the book of Job is a man demanding justice. The divine answer he receives is a speech about a monster. We must first prosecute the identity of this monster. I direct your attention to the evidence board. What you see here are renderings of tablets from ancient Ugarit, specifically from the Baal cycle. These texts, which predate the writing of Job, describe the god Baal's battle with a 7-headed sea monster, the chaos monster of their culture. As the board shows, this creature is the clear linguistic and mythological forerunner to the biblical Leviathan. The author of Job is not inventing a creature. They are employing the standard pre-existing chaos monster trope common to all ancient Near Eastern cultures to frame this speech.
Thank you, Dr. Vance. Dr. Finch, you will now present the traditional understanding. You have 3 minutes.
Dr. Vance is correct that the text does not exist in a vacuum, but her conclusion that this is mere borrowing is a simplistic reading that fails the text's structural brilliance. I direct your attention to the text of Job, chapter 3, verse 8. Job, in his opening curse, references those who are ready to raise up Leviathan. The author is not borrowing the myth, he is seizing it. This is a divine polemic. The author intentionally invokes this well-known chaos monster from the Ugaritic texts for one purpose: to subvert the pagan myth. The proceeding reveals that the creature other cultures fear is the very creature Yahweh commands. This is not cultural borrowing. It is a theological subversion to prove God's absolute sovereignty over chaos.
The initial cases for Exhibit A have been presented. The advocates will now engage in a 4-minute scholarly interchange. Dr. Finch, you have challenged Dr. Vance's position. You may begin the interchange.
Dr. Vance, your ancient Near Eastern trope argument suggests the author of Job is simply unoriginal. How do you explain that in the pagan myths, their chaos monster is a rival deity, whereas in Job, Leviathan is presented as God's creature? Is that not a deliberate polemical subversion?
It is a modification of the trope, not a subversion of its function. The function of the chaos monster in all these myths is to represent the untamable, amoral power of nature. The author of Job uses Leviathan in the exact same way, as a symbol of the natural world that is outside of Job's control.
It is a total subversion, Dr. Vance. The pagan myths are about conflict, Baal struggling to defeat their chaos monster. The text of Job chapter 41 is about sovereignty, God describing his mastery over Leviathan. The author has taken a symbol of rival power and transformed it into a symbol of absolute creation.
This sovereignty is precisely what makes it a common trope. Rulers and high gods always claimed mastery over chaos. What you call a divine polemic is standard royal propaganda, simply mapped onto Yahweh. The function of the symbol remains the same, a political or theological tool to assert authority.
But the context is different. This is not a king's propaganda. It is the climax of a profound theological prosecution of the problem of evil. To reduce this speech to a common trope is to ignore its unique structural function within the book of Job, which is to reframe Job's entire understanding of the cosmos.
The function is to humble Job. The method is using a common, pre-existing mythological symbol. My historical analysis of the symbol's origin as a chaos monster and its function, humbling a mortal, holds, regardless of the theological spin you place on it.
The theological spin is the text, Dr. Vance. You are prioritizing the pagan origin of the symbol over the text's actual usage of it. The text's usage is a unique polemic.
And you are prioritizing a theological interpretation over the clear historical evidence of literary borrowing. We must first establish what this symbol meant to the people of that time. To them, it was the chaos dragon.
The arguments for Exhibit A have been entered into the record. The jury will now have a moment to consider the evidence. We now proceed to Exhibit B as we prosecute. The fiery dragon, Job chapter 41, verses 18 through 21. Poetic hyperbole or fiery serpent archetype. Dr. Vance, you will present the historical critical challenge. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Proctor. This exhibit prosecutes the physicality of Leviathan. The text, in Job chapter 41, verses 18 through 21, describes a creature breathing fire and smoke. By his neesings a light doth shine, out of his mouth go burning lamps, out of his nostrils goeth smoke. I direct your attention to the evidence board. This is not a zoological description. This is standard ancient Near Eastern poetic hyperbole. We have texts describing the fiery breath of powerful kings
and the smoking anger of gods. This is a common metaphorical language used to describe any powerful entity, natural or divine. The author is using the poetic conventions of his day to exaggerate the power of a natural creature, likely the crocodile.
Thank you, Dr. Vance. Dr. Finch, you will now present the traditional understanding. You have 3 minutes.
Dr. Vance has, again, chosen the path of demythology. This is a failure of rigorous investigation. She is assuming it is hyperbole rather than prosecuting the text. I direct your attention to the evidence board. We must analyze this text within its full canonical structure, which includes Numbers chapter 21. The only other time the text describes fiery divine serpent beings, it uses the specific fiery serpent archetype we see here.
The description in Job chapter 41 is the definitive canonical development of this archetype. This is not hyperbole. It is a literal description of the supernatural fiery entity, the ultimate dragon of the supernatural realm.
The initial cases for Exhibit B have been presented. The advocates will now engage in a 4-minute scholarly interchange. Dr. Finch, you have challenged Dr. Vance's position. You may begin the interchange.
Dr. Vance, you dismiss this as poetic hyperbole, yet the description is incredibly specific, lasting 4 full verses. Why would the author dedicate this much textual real estate to a metaphor in the middle of a divine speech that is meant to be the climax of the book?
Because that is what poetry does, Dr. Finch. It uses evocative, exaggerated imagery. You are making a classic genre error by applying a literal materialist reading to an ancient poem. My reading accepts that ancient poetry functions as hyperbole.
I am not making a genre error. I am honoring the genre, which is apocalyptic in nature. This is a divine reveal. Furthermore, you still have not contended with the canonical evidence. The text has already established the fiery serpent archetype in Numbers chapter 21. Job chapter 41 is the logical continuation of that archetype.
You are illegitimately transferring a term from a desert plague narrative, Numbers chapter 21, to a cosmic sea monster poem, Job chapter 41. The contexts are not related. My analysis, that fiery is a common metaphor for powerful in both texts, is the simpler, more rigorous, and more sustainable explanation.
It is the simplistic explanation. It is not more rigorous. It ignores the clear linguistic echo. The true scholarly path is to see the structure. The text is showing us that the fiery serpent of Numbers and the fiery Leviathan are manifestations of the same dragon archetype.
Or the authors, separated by centuries, both use the same common metaphor, fiery, to describe 2 different things. Your canonical development is an assumption you are imposing on the text. My historical analysis of ancient Near Eastern poetic conventions is evidence-based.
My analysis is also evidence-based. The text itself is the evidence. You are selectively prosecuting the text, choosing to see metaphor when the plain sense reading, a fiery supernatural creature, is also consistent with the canon's supernatural realm worldview.
A plain sense reading of a fire-breathing sea monster is not a rigorous analysis, Dr. Finch. It is a failure of intellectual integrity.
The arguments for Exhibit B have been entered into the record. The jury will again have a moment for reflection before we proceed to our concluding exhibit. We now proceed to our concluding exhibit, Exhibit C, as we prosecute Leviathan's purpose, a divine evasion, or God's true answer. Dr. Vance, you will present the historical critical challenge. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Proctor.
This exhibit prosecutes the central human dynamic. Job has spent 30 chapters demanding justice. He asks, "Why am I suffering?" God's answer is a 70-verse speech about exotic animals and the monster Leviathan. I direct your attention to the text of the proceeding itself. God never answers Job's question. This is a divine evasion. The speech is a non sequitur. It is a raw, terrifying display of might makes right. The answer is an intimidation. I am God. I created this unhuntable monster, and you are nothing. How dare you question me? It is a failure of justice, not a fulfillment of it.
Thank you, Dr. Vance. Dr. Finch, you will now present the traditional understanding. You have 3 minutes.
Dr. Vance's analysis is the ultimate human-centric reading. It is also 100% wrong. God's speech is not an evasion. It is the only possible high-level answer. I direct your attention to the text of Job, chapters 1 and 2. This is the divine counsel prologue. The jury knows what Job does not. This entire proceeding is not about Job's personal suffering. It is a cosmic conflict between God and the figure translated as the adversary.
The Leviathan speech is the answer. God is revealing to Job for the first time the true nature of the universe. The cosmos is not anthropocentric. God is managing a supernatural realm populated by this adversary, Leviathan and Behemoth, a reality that Job cannot see. The speech is the answer, and the answer is, this is not about you.
The initial cases for Exhibit C have been presented. The advocates will now engage in a 4-minute scholarly interchange. Dr. Finch, you have challenged Dr. Vance's position. You may begin the interchange.
Dr. Vance, your divine evasion argument is a critical failure. It only works if you ignore the locked-in evidence of the divine counsel prologue in Job chapters 1 and 2. The text itself provides the context for the Leviathan speech. How can you ignore the prologue?
I am not ignoring the prologue. I am, as a historian, arguing that the prose prologue, Job 1 and 2, and the poem, Job 3 through 41, are likely from different authors from different times. I am prosecuting the original poem. And in the poem, Job asks for justice, and God answers with monsters.
That is an evasion.
This is a cut-and-paste scholarly shortcut. We cannot disintegrate the text to fit our modern readings. We must prosecute the final canonical text. In the final text, the prologue exists. It defines the proceeding. Therefore, the Leviathan speech is the answer to the prologue.
It is a terrible answer, Dr. Finch. It suggests that human demands for justice are irrelevant in the face of cosmic conflicts. This reduces Job to a pawn in a divine game. This is a failure to resolve the human dynamic, not an answer to it.
It is the only courageous answer. It is the most profound investigation. The text's point is that justice is not a simple anthropocentric retribution theology, as the Friends argued. The text reveals that the true proceeding is a cosmos so complex that Job's only response is humility.
That is a devotional answer, not an analytical one. You are assuming the prologue, Job 1 and 2, is the key. I am arguing that the human cry for justice, chapters 3 through 37, is the point, and that the divine speech, chapters 38 through 41, is the problem.
And I am arguing that you cannot prosecute a text while ignoring its canonical development. The Leviathan Indictment is the only answer that honors the entirety of the text, from the serpent of Genesis, chapter 3, to the fiery serpent of Numbers, chapter 21, to this, the dragon of Job, chapter 41.
This is theological colonization of the highest order, Dr. Finch. You are prioritizing your theology at the expense of the text's clear, vivid human suffering.
The arguments for Exhibit C have been entered into the record. The jury will now have a moment for reflection before we proceed to the cross-examination. The formal presentation of cases for our 3 exhibits is now complete. We now enter the cross-examination phase. The curator, from the archive, has been monitoring the deliberations from the jury and has selected the following 3 inquiries. Our first inquiry is from Juror Matthias Grau and Heidelberg, Germany, who asks, Dr. Finch, if Leviathan is a literal supernatural entity and the fiery serpent archetype, is the Behemoth also a literal supernatural dragon of the land?
A profound structural question. Yes, the text demands this. The author presents Behemoth and Leviathan as a primordial care, the masters of the land and the sea, both chief of the ways of God. They are the structural balance in the supernatural realm. To demythologize one, Behemoth, is to fail to understand the other, Leviathan.
Dr. Vance.
The Behemoth text is even stronger evidence for my poetic hyperbole argument. The descriptions are clearly exaggerated strongman tropes applied to a known creature, likely the hippopotamus or elephant. The author is pairing 2 hyperbolic poems to make his point. He is not presenting a zoological list of monsters.
The next inquiry is from juror Dr. Evelyn Reed in New Haven, Connecticut, who asks, Dr. Vance, if the Leviathan speech is a divine evasion that fails to answer Job's cry for justice, why does Job accept it? Why does he say, I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes?
This is the central human dynamic of the text. My historical critical reading suggests 2 possibilities. 1, Job's repentance is sarcastic, a final bitter rebuke. Or 2, Job is simply broken. He has been intellectually and emotionally intimidated by a might makes right argument. He does not repent because he has found justice. He repents because he has been crushed.
Dr. Finch.
Job repents because he is not crushed, he is illuminated. For 37 chapters, Job and his friends assumed the universe was a simple anthropocentric retribution theology. The divine speech prosecutes that simplistic view by revealing the true, high-stakes nature of the cosmos. Job repents of his ignorance, not his sin. He finally sees the true rational structure of the universe.
Our concluding inquiry is from juror Kenan Al-Jamil in Alexandria, Egypt, who asks, to both advocates, does the serpent of Genesis chapter 3 have any connection to the Leviathan of Job 41, or are we illegitimately transferring the dragon archetype?
They are not connected. The serpent of Genesis chapter 3 is an etiology for the serpent. The Leviathan of Job chapter 41 is a poetic metaphor for a chaos monster. To link them is a theological colonization that forces 2 different texts from different authors and different genres into a single dragon box.
They are definitively connected. They are the alpha and the omega of the chaos archetype. The serpent is the chaos that invades the human order, the garden. The Leviathan is the chaos that God dominates in the cosmic order. They are the structural bookends of the same cosmic conflict.
The cross-examination is complete. The evidence has been fully presented and interrogated. My profound thanks to both Dr. Vance and Dr. Finch for their passionate and rigorous advocacy. The record of their arguments is now sealed. Before this case is charged to the jury, the proceeding requires one final act of analysis. We now transfer the record to the curator in the archive for his thematic briefing.
Juror, we must dissect the structure of this conflict. On the surface, this was a debate about a monster, but what was the hidden battle beneath the text? Notice how Dr. Vance constructed her reality. She demanded we look outside the Bible to understand it. For her, the truth of Leviathan is locked in the clay tablets of Ugarit. She asks us to view the text as a mirror reflecting its ancient environment. But then, look at the unchallenged assumption at the heart of Dr. Finch's case. He refused to look outside. He demanded we look inside. He built a narrative DNA strand that links the serpent of Eden to the fiery serpents of the desert, to this dragon in the whirlwind. For him, the text is not a mirror. It is a window into a supernatural realm.
This forces us to weigh two profound risks. Is it more intellectually honest to accept Dr. Vance's historical reality, that the biblical authors were borrowing the myths of their neighbors? Or is it more courageous to accept Dr. Finch's theological subversion, that the authors were declaring war on those myths? Juror, we must ask, which method terrifies you more? A Bible that is merely a product of its time, or a Bible that reveals a cosmos teeming with hostile, supernatural intelligence that God alone can master? Does the dragon prove that the biblical writers were primitive, or does it prove that they knew something about the universe that we have forgotten? The investigation continues.
Thank you, Curator. A profound perspective, as always. I affirm for the record that the proceeding here in the Scholarly Sanctum has been conducted with the utmost intellectual rigor. The case now passes to you, the jury. Here is the charge to the jury. This proceeding is now open for your inquiry. You are not bound by the arguments presented. We welcome all dissenting opinions in the deliberation room below.
Charge number 1. The verdict on identity. Regarding Exhibit A, is Leviathan a borrowed ancient Near Eastern chaos trope, Vance, or a deliberate theological polemic, Finch? Charge number 2. The verdict on physicality. Regarding Exhibit B, is the fiery description, Job, chapter 41, verses 18 through 21, poetic hyperbole for a natural beast, Vance, or a literal link to the supernatural fiery serpent archetype, Finch? Charge number 3, the verdict on function. Regarding Exhibit C, is the Leviathan speech a divine evasion of Job's cry for justice, Vance, or the true answer that reveals a cosmic non-anthropocentric conflict, Finch?
Charge number 4, the unasked question. What is the most critical question this investigation failed to ask about Leviathan in Job, chapter 41? Charge number 5, your verdict. After weighing all the evidence, what is your verdict on the primary identity and function of Leviathan? This investigation is committed to holding itself to the same rigorous standards it applies to the text. This proceeding is now open for your inquiry. You are not bound by the arguments presented. If you find the reasoning of the advocates or even the inquiries from this proceeding to be flawed, file your dissenting opinion in the deliberation room below. This investigation does not end. If you believe this relentless pursuit of truth is vital, you belong on this jury. Subscribe to Questions Have Power. Our deliberation room is the comment section. The foundational sources for tonight's proceeding can be found in the case file section of the video description for your own continued investigation. The investigation continues with you.